I'd like to share with you what it took to unravel suffering for myself and the concept of suffering in general, because it really was a long journey. And there are a lot of pieces, and also depends on how you define suffering. We'll start there. Suffering, I define suffering as anything that bothers us. So suffering can be really debilitating, and it can be on the far spectrum. It can be very mild. So mild suffering might be you go to the store and you ordered a sandwich at the store and they put on the wrong kind of bread. And the sandwich is not as good as you want it because it's not the bread you like, but it's still okay, right? People suffer for that. I've suffered for that. And maybe it's not worth suffering for you, but you know what? That energy of paying money for what you desire and then having to pay money and not getting what you desire and sort of being stuck with it, that doesn't feel good, right? So we'll just call that mild suffering. And those little micro sufferings, they happen all the time, right? I mean, for most of us, it's like you become attached to walking this way to go to the store, and then the sidewalk's closed and you have to detour and you got to walk an extra 6 blocks or something. And we'll suffer for that too. It's not really worth suffering about, but when we measure and compare everything that's happening in our life, then we always notice when things aren't as good as we'd like or aren't as good as they were last time. And that's a way that most of us suffer. And, that's what my college takes care of. But there's the other far spectrum of suffering. There's the loss. So loss of your relationship unexpectedly. Someone breaks up with you and says goodbye and you don't even know why that happened. That creates suffering. Mysteries create suffering. And they usually create suffering because we fill the mystery, right? We have a mystery. Why did that happen? And then we fill it with the reason why it happened. And the reason that we fill it with is usually awful, right? It's usually something wrong with us or, God, or on the worst case, there's something wrong with the world. Okay. Now we're living in a world that's terrible. And who wants to be there? Right? That's another way of suffering. And then there's the deeper suffering where everything goes wrong over and over and over. Your karma just feels you're definitely just going into the gutter. And that's no matter how much effort you put into a business or something, it just falls apart. And then you can't seem to get a date and meet anybody, and you don't know how you're gonna feed yourself because you don't have any money for food. You're afraid of being homeless next week, and everything just sort of starts crashing down. There's suffering for that too, but that's more like stress because it's in the moment. It's what do I have to do right now? And we're suffering for what we perceive could happen in the future, and we suffer for what happened to us in the past to get us to this position right here, right now. But right here, right now, we generally don't suffer for. Right here, right now is stress. It's problems to fix, things to solve, things to do to make it better. When that thing's over, that's when we suffer. We suffer after the fact. Once we're no longer interacting with the problem, then we tend to suffer for it. So on the far spectrum of suffering, I've been there too. I've been suicidal a couple of times, really bad. It's on the bridge once after a really terrible failed day. May as well tell a story. I had a healing center in the city that was all excited about what I do, and they're having an event. They wanted me to go down, and I literally took my last $20 to get gas to go down there because I thought I'd be making money, and I went down, and it was a free event. I was supposed to do free sessions for people, and so I didn't even know if I was going to have the gas to get home. And it was ridiculous because, people are really getting good benefit. I even had some guy run in the building and say, "Hey, I heard Jesus was up here. They're doing miracles." And I was like, no, that's not actually happening. But if you want your body language adjusted. So anyway, the drive home was really rough because, people being in gratitude for me, and me, I've got no food, no gas to get home. I've got a 45-minute drive. Don't know if my car is going to make it. people I'm living with aren't happy with me, and I was just feeling disconnected from everybody. And, like my body was just like shaking, like end it, end it, end it. I remember crossing the bridge. It wasn't the Golden Gate. Was that the Golden Gate that day or the Oakland Bridge? I don't know. But man, I was this close to just stopping my car and just jumping over the bridge because just could not handle that energy. I was like churning up in my body. It was really awful. And it was really only because of, my training that I remembered to like practice my training, make sure I'm in reality, let this thing pass and then make a choice. That's the only reason I made it over that bridge. So I know what it's like to be really close to awful places. I've found some rather dark holes, and lucky for me, I pulled myself out of them. But, unraveling suffering, if you're suffering and you'd like to unravel why you are suffering, come to my college, come to the Playshop. What we do is unravel not the issues that you think are bothering you. What we handle is the mechanism that feeds you those issues, because those issues are not real. They're no longer happening. Those things that are driving you crazy aren't happening right now. They're just memories. They're just thoughts, right? They're thoughts about what you think might be going on, or they're memories about what did go on. In either case, they are not worth suffering for. And I get that you might not believe me right now because it feels overwhelming, but I did not just do a weekend class with some guru and now think I'm an expert on suffering. Like, I've spent a couple of decades on this. I once did Sweat Lodge once. I did Sweat Lodge many times, but to really understand suffering, I committed to doing Sweat Lodge every 3 days for just about 8 or 9 months. Every 3 days. And if you don't know what Sweat Lodge is, it's a Native American tradition. It's a low tent with a fire pit and a bunch of steam. And it's a terrible description, excuse me, but it's like being in a super hot sauna and sing songs and feel your suffering and burn past your suffering. So I'm not Native American. I'm not going to explain how it works or what's going on there. I was the person who ran the Sweat Lodge is trained by Kingfisher, so semi-traditional. Kingfisher is a Native American who opened up his sweat lodges to us folk. And, I got a lot of benefit. There were times when I thought I was dying, laying on the floor, trying to suck cold air out of the dirt, choking on dirt. Times I wanted to lift the flap and try to get cold air, and times when I could see cold air coming in, and times when I sucked that cold air, and other times when I closed it and wouldn't let myself take that easy out. You know what? After 8 or 9 months, I was able to sit up. I didn't care how hot it was. I didn't care if my skin was falling off. I could sit up and sing and feel my joy. And that was really the benefit for me of learning about suffering. And that's that below the suffering that we experience, which is kind of like on the surface, right? Below that suffering, there is a joy that cannot be extinguished. And that joy, it's really what keeps you going, right? It's what drives you crazy about your suffering. If you didn't have a joy underneath your suffering, you would just suffer, and like that's just the way life would be, and you wouldn't care. But the fact that suffering drives you nuts, that suffering, that it doesn't have to be there. That you can live without it. The only reason that is that below it, you have that joy. It's already there. Uncovering that joy is about letting go of what you suffer for. And letting go of what you suffer for, I don't know that it's possible through examination of the actual issues. And that's not what we do in the Playshop. What we do in the Playshop is we look at the mechanics of how those issues are fed to us, why those issues are fed to us. What is that internal body language mechanism that believes it has to constantly repeat the past crappy stuff and feed it up to us for us to deal with? That's not reality. That is literally like a computer with something wrong with it, like always spinning up the same information, even though you're trying to run a different program. And the good news is that, this is all unravelable. And the good news is that you don't really need me to do it. I unraveled it for myself. I know how I unraveled it for myself, and I've laid out the steps for you in the YBNL Playshop. If you follow along and do the exercises, your suffering will go away. You will unpeel or unravel that mechanism and gain control of your body language, so that when your body tells you that you aren't beautiful, or that you're not smart enough for that job or whatever, you'll be like, ha! And you'll just laugh. And eventually that voice just won't be there anymore, because that your inner critic, it's there for a reason. And your inner critic can be your best friend. It doesn't have to be criticizing you. It can be watching your back. That's what we go for. And I know that what I'm describing is priceless. I get it. It's what I've spent my whole life looking for, couldn't find it. And so I found teachers who would help me unravel, figure it out, and then put it together for you. It's easy. It's simple. It's more simple than easy. Sometimes the exercises have to be repeated, a little bit. And this isn't a weekend workshop where you take a workshop, learn a couple things, and then boom, your life is better. We can't claim that. You learn the information quickly. You can learn it in a weekend. The exercises, though, you get to repeat them over and over. And when you do, that repetition actually teaches your body to stop referencing the past and to stop measuring, comparing everything, and to just notice what's actually going on. Because what's going on in the world, it isn't suffering. What's going on in the world is below that. It's the joy. And joy comes out in really funky ways, really funny ways, but there's still joy there. And when you feel it and see it and unravel it, you'll never let go of it. And that suffering can go away. And you're still going to have stress in life. Stuff is still going to happen, right? And you're going to have stress, and you're going to have to handle problems, right? And you fix it. But once those problems are over, they're over. You will not dwell on stuff any longer. No more suffering. That's the promise of this work. And I can promise it because I don't give it to you. I show you how to give it to yourself. And if you don't get it, it just means you haven't repeated it enough, or you missed something in a lesson. It's really so simple. I would love for you to get it. I know you can get it quickly. Come to the college. It's free to get in and to try this out until the end of the year, until the end of 2022. I'll put the link here in the description somewhere, or come to yourbodyneverlies.org. You'll find the link. You'll figure it out. You can be complete with all of your suffering. If you work at it, if you can put 10, 20 hours a week into this, you can be done with all your suffering within a few weeks. And that's it forever. And you'll forget about the training, maybe, whatever. Then a year will go by and something crazy will happen, and you'll handle it. But then it'll be over, and you realize, oh, wow, I'm not suffering for that. I'll repeat, one of my stories. I've been through a couple wildfires. 2015, the Valley Fire in California took out a place of business, place where I was working, took out my home. It took out a lot, actually. And a couple days later, I'm fine, And then again in 2017, was it 2017? Yeah, 2017, there was another fire, and, we lost our rental home in that fire too. We're living in the woods again at the end of a, dead-end road. So silly. But that place burned down, and that time that it burned down, I'm just on my way to, I was, going to massage school, and I go down the hill, and all these houses are on fire. And I'm like, wait, that's not right. We had to drive back up the hill through the fire to wake up our neighbors who were sleeping from their party the night before, So I had to drive out of the fire, and I remember driving by a propane tank with the paint on it was bubbling. It was so hot, I thought that was going to explode. It was really a crazy day with a lot of stress. I went to our friend's house, spent the night, woke up in the morning, opened my eyes, looked out the window, and I didn't recognize where I was. It took me like a second. I was like, oh yeah, it was a fire yesterday. And then I went right back to sleep. Like there's literally zero residual stress. And I get, if you haven't done my training, that might seem really far out, but that's the fact. Real stress, that's going to happen. But stress happens right here, right now. That's problems that we are working on. Old stress, or suffering as I call it, isn't real. It's not happening anymore. It's only happening in our imagination. It's only happening in our mind, which means it's really just body language. It's not actual issues. It's not actual problems to solve. It's just body language. And when you gain control of how your body language works, those messages can become positive. Or, like I prefer just silence, actually. When I hear a positive message, I'm like, okay, sure. Because silence for me is where it's at, because in silence, I can feel the magic. I can feel what's happening around me. And I don't have to have a voice telling me what it is I'm feeling. I can just feel it. In this place, there's bliss. It's just joy and bliss. And you know what? Yeah, I get stressed sometimes. I get pulled out of my bliss and have to work on my stress. But when the stress is over, it's over and I'm back in my bliss. And I would love for you to have this too. You can unravel your suffering no matter how terrible it is. And, really, like I've come back from suicide a couple times. I've come back from some really dark places. If I was honest with myself, it's probably more than two. And, it's over. It's done. Life is good now. Life is fun. The only thing that stresses me out now is I've got a lot of teaching to do, and a lot of people that teach this too. Come to my school, check it out, and you know what? It's free. If it doesn't work, you just let it go. Who cares? You're not going to be out of anything. And, come the first of the year, I'm going to start charging because, hey, I got a mortgage to pay, got a child's college I'm going to have to pay in a few years, and, I need money too. But the main thing is getting us all over the suffering. What I'm offering here is priceless, which is why I don't know how to charge and why it's free right now. But, that'll get figured out. What is figured out is the end of suffering and control of our internal body language. And you can have that. I would love for you to have it. And I hope to meet you soon.